The crystal chandeliers of the Metropolitan Museum cast fractured light across marble floors as Manhattan's elite gathered for the annual Children's Foundation charity auction. Cassandra Thorne moved through the shadows along the ballroom's perimeter, her trained eyes cataloging every face, every exit, every potential threat. To the glittering crowd of philanthropists and power brokers, she was invisible. Just another security consultant in a simple black dress, unremarkable among the designer gowns and diamond jewelry. But Cassandra saw everything they missed. The muscle tension in the supposed waiter's shoulders. The way the new cleaning staff member's eyes tracked movement patterns rather than focusing on his assigned tasks. The subtle bulge beneath the event coordinator's jacket that suggested body armor rather than an unfortunate fashion choice. Have you ever been to a charity gala in New York? The kind where million-dollar donations get announced over champagne and caviar while most of the city struggles to pay rent? Tonight's gathering felt different. Dangerous currents ran beneath the polished surface like riptides waiting to pull someone under. Adriano Valeni entered the ballroom precisely at 8:30, commanding attention without effort. At 38, he possessed the kind of presence that made conversations pause and photographers angle for better shots. His custom Italian suit fit perfectly across broad shoulders, and his dark hair was styled with the casual precision that cost more than most people's monthly salary. But it was his eyes that marked him as different from the other wealthy men in attendance. They held a stillness that Cassandra recognized immediately, the watchful calm of someone who had killed and would kill again if necessary. The newspapers called him a legitimate businessman. The FBI suspected him of running the most sophisticated criminal organization on the East Coast. Cassandra knew him simply as her principal, the man she had been hired to keep alive. She had been watching him for 6 months now, maintaining perfect anonymity while ensuring his safety at dozens of events exactly like this one. Board meetings, restaurant dinners, theater premieres, always in the background, always unnoticed, always ready to eliminate any threat that emerged. Tonight felt different. Adriano moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands with senators and judges, kissing the cheeks of socialites whose husbands owed him favors they preferred not to discuss publicly. His legitimate shipping empire provided perfect cover for his less legal enterprises, and events like this one allowed him to maintain the relationships that kept both sides of his operation running smoothly. Cassandra tracked his movement while simultaneously monitoring the room for anomalies. The supposed photographer who hadn't taken a single picture. The charity volunteer whose calm earpiece suggested coordination beyond event management. The security guard whose positioning created blind spots rather than coverage. Her training screamed warnings that she couldn't ignore. SEAL Team 6 had taught her to trust those instincts absolutely. In Kandahar, hesitation meant death. In Somalia, the difference between enemy combatants and civilians often came down to microsecond observations that conscious thought couldn't process fast enough. Here in Manhattan's most prestigious cultural institution, surrounded by the city's wealthiest citizens, those same instincts detected a kill team positioning for an execution. The auction began at 9 o'clock sharp, providing perfect cover for the operation she could now see taking shape. Adriano took his assigned seat at table 1, directly in front of the podium where the auctioneer began presenting the evening's featured lots. Cassandra noted how the museum's own security had been supplemented with additional personnel. Personnel she didn't recognize. Personnel whose credentials she would bet everything weren't legitimate. As the bidding opened on a Monet sketch, she counted at least 8 individuals who moved with military precision through their assigned positions. Kitchen staff who carried themselves like infantry. Event coordinators whose earpieces suggested tactical communication rather than logistical coordination. Security guards whose weapon placement indicated combat readiness rather than crowd control. Aries Black, the mercenary organization specialized in executive termination contracts. Military-trained professionals who turned warfare into a business model. She had encountered them twice during classified operations in Eastern Europe. Both times, significant firepower and extensive planning had been required to neutralize their teams. Tonight they had come for Adriano. The auction continued around them, prices climbing into 6 figures for paintings and sculptures, while death positioned itself among the champagne glasses and appetizer trays. Cassandra moved closer to the primary target area, her own positioning creating overlapping fields of fire should the situation deteriorate as rapidly as her training suggested it would. Adriano bid casually on a Renaissance bronze, his attention apparently focused entirely on the artwork being presented. But Cassandra caught the subtle signs that indicated his own awareness of the developing situation. The slight adjustment in his posture that provided better access to the weapon she knew he carried. The way his eyes tracked movement at the room's periphery, even while engaging in conversation with the pharmaceutical heiress beside him. He had survived this long by trusting his own instincts. Tonight those instincts were telling him the same thing hers were. The charity gala was about to become a battlefield. The auctioneer's gavel struck the podium with theatrical precision as bidding opened on a stunning Picasso sketch. $8 million. The opening bid echoed through the ballroom as Manhattan's elite raised their paddles with casual indifference. Cassandra watched the crowd's attention focus entirely on the artwork while death positioned itself among the crystal glasses and silk evening gowns. She had identified the team leader. Mid-40s, buzz-cut barely visible beneath his waiter's cap, moving through the crowd with the kind of spatial awareness that came from years of combat operations. His eyes swept the room in overlapping patterns, cataloging exits and obstacles while maintaining the perfect facade of a catering professional. When he touched his earpiece twice in rapid succession, Cassandra knew the operation had entered its final phase. Time compressed the way it always did before contact. Heartbeat slowing, vision narrowing to critical details. Muscle memory from thousands of hours of training overriding conscious thought as her body prepared for violence. The Picasso reached 15 million when the first operative made his move. He emerged from behind the champagne station with fluid precision, the Glock appearing in his right hand as if materializing from thin air. Professional. Trained. Deadly. His trajectory would bring him within 6 feet of Adriano's table in approximately 12 seconds. Close enough for a guaranteed kill shot, even with panicked crowd movement. Cassandra was already moving. Her path took her behind the auction display case, featuring Byzantine jewelry, using the priceless artifacts as cover while she closed distance on the advancing killer. The marble floor created no sound beneath her feet. Years of approaching enemy positions in hostile territory had taught her to move like a shadow, invisible until the moment she chose to become death itself. The gunman raised his weapon as the auctioneer announced $16 million for the sketch. In the split second before he could acquire target lock on Adriano, Cassandra struck. Her left hand clamped over his mouth, while her right arm snaked around his throat in a perfect blood choke. The gun fell silent to the marble floor as she applied pressure to his carotid arteries with surgical precision. Unconsciousness in 4 seconds. Brain death in 30 if she maintained the hold. She chose unconsciousness, lowering his limp body behind the jewelry display where the shadows would conceal him for several crucial minutes. But she had been right about the coordination. The first gunman's neutralization triggered the rest of the team into immediate action. 3 more weapons appeared simultaneously throughout the ballroom as the charity auction transformed into a killing field. Guests screamed and dove for cover as operatives emerged from catering positions and security posts with military synchronization. Adriano moved with lethal grace, overturning the auction table and drawing his own weapon in a fluid motion that suggested extensive tactical training. The pharmaceutical heiress beside him froze in terror before he shoved her toward the emergency exit with rough efficiency. His dark eyes swept the room, tracking threats while seeking cover among the panicked civilians. That was when he saw her. Cassandra vaulted over the Byzantine display case with athletic precision, landing in a combat crouch as bullets shattered priceless crystal chandelier drops above her head. She had abandoned all pretense of anonymity. The quiet security consultant had vanished, replaced by a Tier 1 operator engaging multiple hostiles in close-quarters combat. She moved like lethal poetry through the chaos. The second gunman had taken position behind the Renaissance sculpture display, using a 14th-century marble pieta as cover while firing into the crowd. Cassandra used the panicked civilians as concealment, moving in a crouch between overturned tables and scattered evening gowns. When she reached optimal distance, she rose and put 2 rounds center mass through his body armor with the Sig Sauer she had drawn from beneath her dress. The third operative tried to flank her position from the kitchen entrance. Fatal mistake. Cassandra had already anticipated the maneuver, using the ballroom's architecture to create overlapping fields of fire that funneled him into a kill zone. She dropped him with a perfect headshot as he cleared the doorway, his weapon clattering across the marble floor to rest among scattered rose petals from the centerpieces. But the fourth gunman had taken hostages. An elderly senator and his wife cowered against the far wall as the Ares black operative held them at gunpoint, using their bodies as human shields while demanding safe passage through the emergency exits. The old woman was crying, her diamond necklace catching the emergency lighting as terror transformed her elegant features into something raw and desperate. Cassandra felt the familiar cold certainty that came with impossible shots. SEAL Team 6 had trained her for exactly this scenario. Hostage rescue in close quarters with civilian casualties unacceptable. Wind speed, 0. Distance, 42 meters. Target exposure, 18 inches of shoulder visible beside the hostage's head. She breathed out slowly and squeezed the trigger. The bullet caught the operative in the temple, dropping him instantly without touching either civilian. The senator and his wife collapsed to their knees as Cassandra emerged from cover, her weapon still raised as she cleared the remaining corners of the ballroom with practiced efficiency. The entire engagement had lasted 93 seconds. Adriano stood among the wreckage of crystal and blood, his weapon lowered but ready, watching her with something that might have been awe or recognition or both. Around them, the elite of Manhattan cowered behind overturned tables and scattered auction paddles while sirens wailed in the distance. He had seen everything. The impossible speed, the surgical precision, the way she moved through lethal chaos like it was a choreographed dance she had performed 1,000 times before. When their eyes met across the destroyed ballroom, Cassandra saw the exact moment he understood what she really was. Not just security, not just protection, a weapon, perfectly trained, completely lethal, and entirely devoted to keeping him alive. The silence that followed gunfire was always the most dangerous moment. Cassandra kept her weapon raised, scanning the ballroom's destroyed elegance for any remaining threats while her ears rang from the confined space shooting. Crystal shards crunched beneath her feet as she moved through the aftermath, checking each fallen operative for signs of life while maintaining tactical awareness of every shadow and doorway. The Metropolitan Museum's ballroom looked like a war zone. Overturned auction tables created impromptu barricades among scattered evening gowns and abandoned champagne flutes. Priceless artwork bore bullet holes that would make insurance adjusters weep. Blood pooled on marble floors that had hosted presidents and royalty, mixing with scattered rose petals from the destroyed centerpieces. Adriano stood 20 feet away, his own weapon lowered but not holstered, watching her move through the carnage with lethal precision. She could feel his eyes tracking her every movement as she cleared the room with textbook thoroughness. The way she checked corners, the fluid economy of motion that marked her as elite tier operations, the cold professional calm that came from extensive combat experience. He was cataloging everything, recording details that would allow him to piece together exactly what kind of weapon had been hidden among his security team for the past 6 months. The surviving civilians huddled in corners, their evening wear torn and their faces pale with shock. Senator Morrison clutched his wife while she sobbed against his chest, both of them still processing how close they had come to execution. The pharmaceutical heiress pressed herself against the emergency exit door, her diamond bracelet catching emergency lighting as her hands shook uncontrollably. Cassandra holstered her weapon and moved toward the civilians with careful deliberation. Her entire demeanor shifted from predator to protector as she knelt beside the senator's wife, her voice gentle despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. She is having a panic attack, Cassandra assessed quickly, recognizing the hyperventilation and trembling that followed traumatic shock. "You are safe now," she told the woman, her tone carrying the kind of authority that made people believe despite all evidence to the contrary. "The threat is neutralized. Help is coming." The old woman looked up at her with eyes wide with terror and something that might have been gratitude. "You killed them all," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant sirens. "You saved us." Cassandra felt the familiar disconnect between her actions and their consequences. In the field, Neutralizing threats was simply tactical necessity. Here among Manhattan's elite, surrounded by priceless art and designer gowns, the same skills that made her invaluable as an operator marked her as something dangerous and extraordinary. FBI and NYPD tactical units arrived 7 minutes after the shooting stopped, their entry coordinated and professional despite the chaos they encountered. Cassandra had already secured the scene, separated the civilians from the bodies, and ensured no additional threats remained concealed among the wreckage. The lead FBI agent was a woman in her 40s with the kind of hard competence that came from years of dealing with the worst humanity had to offer. She surveyed the ballroom, taking in the 4 dead operatives, the precision of their wounds, and the tactical efficiency of their placement throughout the space. Professional work, Agent Martinez observed, her eyes moving from the bodies to Cassandra. Military precision. You are? Security consultant, Cassandra replied, offering her credentials with steady hands despite the adrenaline crash beginning to set in. Licensed through Hamilton Protection Services. Agent Martinez examined the identification while crime scene photographers began documenting the carnage. The badge and permits were legitimate, backed by a carefully constructed cover identity that would withstand casual investigation. But Cassandra could see the questions forming behind the agent's professional expression. 4 armed professionals neutralized by a single security consultant, Martinez said, her tone carefully neutral. That is impressive. I was fortunate, Cassandra replied, maintaining the facade of civilian competence despite the obvious impossibility of her claim. They underestimated the response time. But Adriano was watching this exchange with the kind of focused attention that suggested he saw through every carefully constructed lie. He had observed her tactical movement patterns during the engagement, had seen the way she cleared corners and acquired targets with muscle memory that spoke of extensive military training, had witnessed shooting skills that went far beyond anything taught in civilian security courses. When Agent Martinez moved on to interview other witnesses, Adriano approached her with slow deliberation. His dark eyes held a mixture of respect and curiosity that made her stomach tighten with something that definitely was not fear. Security consultant, he said quietly, his voice carrying just enough skepticism to make it a question rather than a statement. Interesting career change. Cassandra met his gaze without flinching, though every instinct screamed at her to maintain operational security. Her cover was blown. 6 months of perfect anonymity destroyed by 93 seconds of necessary violence. But looking at him now, seeing the way he regarded her with something approaching awe, she realized he had probably known all along. You hired me, she replied carefully, testing how much he might be willing to reveal. You tell me what my qualifications are. A slight smile played at the corners of his mouth, the first genuine expression she had seen from him in all their months of professional interaction. What I hired, he said, moving close enough that his voice would not carry to the investigating agents, was the best security money could buy. What I got was something far more interesting. The implication hung between them like a challenge and an invitation. He knew she was not what she pretended to be, had known, perhaps, from the beginning. The question now was what he intended to do with that knowledge. Around them, the crime scene investigation continued its methodical documentation of violence in one of Manhattan's most prestigious cultural institutions. But Cassandra found herself focused entirely on the man whose life she had just saved and whose secrets she was only beginning to understand. The anonymous security consultant who had protected him from the shadows was gone forever. What remained was something far more dangerous and infinitely more valuable. The FBI field office on Federal Plaza buzzed with activity as Agent Martinez assembled the case file that would reshape how law enforcement viewed organized crime in New York. The Ares Black mercenaries had carried military-grade identification that revealed connections spanning 3 continents and a client list that read like a Fortune 500 directory of corporate warfare. Cassandra sat in interview room 3, maintaining perfect composure despite 12 hours of questioning that would have broken most civilian contractors. Her cover story held under scrutiny, backed by documentation sophisticated enough to fool federal investigators. But she could see the doubt in Agent Martinez's eyes, the questions that lingered beneath professional courtesy. How does a security consultant develop reflexes fast enough to neutralize 4 military-trained operatives in under 2 minutes? Martinez had asked repeatedly, approaching the impossibility from different angles. Your background check shows private sector experience only. Extensive training, Cassandra had replied each time, offering just enough detail to seem forthcoming without revealing anything substantial. Competitive shooting, martial arts, personal protection courses. But they both knew the explanation fell short of the reality they had witnessed. When Adriano entered the interview room at 3 in the morning, Agent Martinez's entire demeanor shifted. He carried himself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to making problems disappear, and his legal representation included partners from 3 different white-shoe law firms whose hourly rates could fund small countries. Mr. Valeni, Martinez said carefully, we appreciate your cooperation with this investigation. Your security contractor performed admirably under extreme circumstances. Adriano took the chair beside Cassandra with deliberate familiarity, his presence immediately transforming the power dynamic in the room. She is under my personal protection during this process, he said quietly, his tone carrying implications that made the federal agent stiffen slightly. Any further questioning will be conducted through my attorneys. The message was clear. Cassandra was no longer just a witness to be interrogated. She had become an asset worth protecting, and Adriano possessed the resources to make that protection absolute. Agent Martinez gathered her files with professional resignation. The Aries Black investigation would continue, but the most valuable witness had just been placed beyond easy reach. We may have additional questions as the case develops, she said, offering business cards that everyone in the room knew would go unanswered. When they left the federal building, dawn was breaking over Manhattan's financial district. Adriano's car waited at the curb, armored and discreet, with a security detail that moved like they had military training themselves. Cassandra found herself studying their positioning and communication protocols, recognizing competence that went far beyond civilian protection services. You knew, she said as they settled into the back seat, tinted windows providing privacy from the awakening city. About my background. You knew before tonight. Adriano smiled, the expression containing secrets she was only beginning to understand. Cassandra Thorne, he said, using her real name for the first time. Former Navy SEAL Team 6. Specialized in executive protection and direct action operations. Classified service records spanning 11 years and 4 continents. Her blood ran cold despite the heated interior. Cover identities that had taken years to construct were unraveling in real time. If he knew that much, he could know everything. Her missions, her targets, the reasons she had left military service to disappear into civilian anonymity. How long? She asked, her voice steady despite the implications racing through her mind. 6 months, he replied, pouring coffee from a service built into the car's console. Since the day I hired Hamilton Protection Services, and specifically requested you for my personal security detail. The confession should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something that might have been relief. The exhausting performance of being ordinary was over. The careful mediocrity that had hidden her true capabilities for years had been stripped away by necessity and violence. Why? She asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. Because my legitimate business empire has a problem, Adriano said, his tone shifting into something harder and more focused. My shipping operations provide cover for activities that make me targets for elimination, not street crime or territorial disputes. Professional military contractors hired by rivals who want my market share. The Aries Black team had not been random violence. They represented industrial espionage taken to its logical extreme. Corporate warfare conducted by special operations veterans who sold their skills to the highest bidder. You needed someone who could recognize and counter that level of threat, Cassandra said, understanding beginning to dawn. Someone with the training to fight professionals on equal terms. I needed the best, Adriano replied simply. And after extensive research, that meant I needed you. The compliment carried weight that went beyond flattery. He had identified her capabilities through careful investigation, then orchestrated circumstances that would bring those skills into his service. The random security assignment had been anything but random. Tonight was a test, she realized, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. You knew they were coming. I knew someone was coming, Adriano corrected. My intelligence network indicated movement against my organization, but not the specifics of timing or methodology. What I learned tonight was whether you would choose to protect me or preserve your anonymity when forced to decide between them. And now you know, Cassandra said, though she was not entirely certain what her choice revealed about her own motivations and loyalties. Now I know, he agreed, his dark eyes holding hers with intensity that made her pulse quicken, that I have been employing the most dangerous woman in North America as my security consultant. The question is whether you are willing to become something more. The offer hung between them like a bridge across an abyss. Her old life was gone, destroyed by 93 seconds of necessary violence that had exposed capabilities she could never again pretend not to possess. What he was proposing was partnership on terms that would make use of everything she had learned in places that officially did not exist. Something more, she repeated, testing the words and their implications. Head of security for my entire organization, Adriano said. Legitimate and otherwise. Salary commensurate with your unique qualifications. Complete operational authority over all protective protocols. In the job description, she asked, though she suspected the answer would include activities that pushed the boundaries of legal employment. Keep me alive, he said simply, by whatever means necessary. The car pulled into the underground garage of a building that probably cost more than most people's lifetime earnings. As they rode the elevator to his penthouse, Cassandra found herself weighing possibilities that would have been unthinkable 24 hours earlier. She could disappear again, create a new identity, and find another anonymous position where her skills would remain hidden. Or she could step fully into the dangerous world where those skills were not just valuable, but essential. When the elevator doors opened onto luxury that redefined her understanding of wealth, Adriano turned to face her with an expression that suggested he already knew which choice she would make. The quiet security consultant who had protected him from the shadows was gone forever. What remained was a question of how far she was willing to follow him into the darkness that money and power created around men like him. The attack came at dawn, 3 days after the Metropolitan Museum massacre had made international headlines. Cassandra was reviewing security protocols in Adriano's penthouse office when the building's alarm system activated with urgent precision. Four vehicles had surrounded the building's perimeter while a helicopter circled overhead, its occupants moving with military coordination that spoke of professional planning. This time, they had come for her. The surviving members of the Ares Black Network had identified her as the primary threat to their operation. Corporate espionage required eliminating witnesses who could testify about methods and clients. Cassandra had become a liability that demanded immediate termination. She moved to the window wall overlooking Fifth Avenue, using the armored glass to assess the tactical situation developing below. 8 operatives positioned at street level, sniper team visible on the building across the street, helicopter maintaining overwatch position. Professional setup designed to prevent escape rather than achieve quick elimination. They want to take me alive, she realized, recognizing the deployment pattern from her own training in high-value target extraction. Dead witnesses could not reveal intelligence about classified operations or client identities. Adriano appeared beside her with fluid silence, his own weapon drawn as he evaluated the threat through the reinforced glass. His expression held none of the surprise or fear that would have marked a civilian facing military assault. Instead, he displayed the cold calculation of someone accustomed to violence as a business tool. How many? He asked, his voice carrying the kind of lethal calm that had built his reputation throughout New York's criminal hierarchy. Professional team, Cassandra replied, her mind already running tactical scenarios. 12 minimum, probably more. Extraction focused rather than elimination. They need intelligence I possess. About what? Adriano said, though his tone suggested he suspected the answer would complicate their situation significantly. Classified operations spanning 4 years and 6 countries, Cassandra admitted, recognizing that complete honesty had become necessary for survival. Client lists, target profiles, methodology documentation. Information that could destabilize governments and collapse multinational corporations. The implications hung between them like live ordnance. She was not just a former operator seeking civilian anonymity. She was a walking intelligence archive whose capture would provide leverage over presidents and prime ministers. Adriano moved to his desk, and activated a communication system that connected him directly to every level of his organization. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority that transformed suggestions into commands requiring immediate execution. Emergency Protocol 7, he said into the secure channel. Full mobilization. Target package is under my personal protection. Authorization code Omega 77. The response was immediate. Every asset in his criminal empire received deployment orders that would bring overwhelming force to bear on the Ares Black extraction team. Street soldiers and high-level operatives alike understood that failure to protect Adriano's designated asset would result in consequences that extended beyond professional disappointment. Within 20 minutes, the tactical situation had reversed completely. Adriano's people moved through Manhattan streets with precision that rivaled military operations, surrounding the extraction team with superior numbers and overwhelming firepower. The helicopter found itself bracketed by rooftop positions, while the street-level operatives discovered their escape routes compromised by coordinated blocking tactics. But the real transformation occurred when Adriano convened an emergency meeting of the 5 families that controlled New York's criminal landscape. The conference room in his building's secure sublevel had hosted negotiations that shaped decades of territorial agreements and profit-sharing arrangements. Tonight, it would witness something unprecedented. The public claiming of a woman whose capabilities threatened to reshape the balance of power among organizations that had coexisted through carefully maintained mutual respect. Cassandra stood beside Adriano's chair as representatives from the Torino, Bassano, Ricci, and Carbone families filed into the room with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. These men had built empires through violence and intimidation, but they recognized superior force when it demonstrated itself through professional competence. "Gentlemen," Adriano began, his voice filling the room with quiet authority, "recent events have created a situation requiring clarification of territorial boundaries and protective protocols." The Torino patriarch, a man in his 70s whose survival through 5 decades of criminal warfare spoke to lethal intelligence, leaned forward with obvious interest. "The woman who eliminated 4 Ares Black operatives at the Metropolitan Museum," he said carefully, "has created complications for all our organizations. Cassandra has accepted the position of head of security for my entire operation," Adriano replied, his tone making clear that discussion of alternative arrangements would not be tolerated. "Any action against her will be considered a direct assault on my family and responded to accordingly." The declaration carried implications that rippled through the room like shock waves. Claiming someone under family protection was essentially a marriage announcement in their world. It meant her enemies became his enemies, her safety became his responsibility, and any attack on her would trigger the kind of response that started territorial wars. "She possesses intelligence that makes her valuable to government agencies and corporate rivals alike," the Bassano representative observed, his tone suggesting concern about the attention such protection might attract. "Harboring such an asset could bring unwanted federal scrutiny. Then it becomes everyone's interest to ensure that scrutiny never materializes," Adriano replied smoothly. "Her capabilities benefit our mutual security. Her elimination would leave us all more vulnerable to the kind of professional threats she neutralized." But it was his next words that transformed their relationship irrevocably. "No one touches her tonight," he said, his voice carrying the kind of finality that ended discussions and established new realities. "No one touches her ever. She is mine, and I am hers. That is how this works now." Cassandra felt something shift inside her chest that had nothing to do with tactical considerations or professional arrangements. The public claiming was more than protection. It was acknowledgement that the careful distance they had maintained during 6 months of professional interaction had become something deeper and infinitely more dangerous. When the meeting ended with unanimous agreement to honor Adriano's protection declaration, she found herself alone with him in the aftermath of decisions that would reshape both their lives. "You realize what this means," she said. Though part of her was not entirely certain, she understood the implications herself. "It means you stop running," Adriano replied, moving close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "It means you stop hiding what you are and start being who you are meant to be." "And who am I meant to be?" she asked, though the question felt like stepping off a cliff into unknown territory. "Mine," he said simply, his hands framing her face with surprising gentleness. "And I am meant to be yours. Everything else is just logistics." When he kissed her, it was with the kind of intensity that erased boundaries between protection and possession, between professional partnership and personal claiming. The careful distance that had defined their relationship dissolved under the weight of shared danger and mutual recognition. The anonymous security consultant who had hidden among the shadows was gone forever. What remained was a woman who had chosen to step fully into the light beside a man dangerous enough to protect her from the consequences of that choice. The war ended on a Tuesday morning in an abandoned warehouse in Queens, where corporate espionage met organized crime, and both discovered the lethal efficiency of military precision combined with criminal ruthlessness. Cassandra studied the tactical display spread across the conference table in Adriano's private office, satellite imagery and intelligence reports painting a comprehensive picture of the remaining Ares Black network. 3 weeks of investigation had revealed the full scope of the conspiracy against Adriano's organization, and the client list read like a directory of his business rivals seeking to eliminate competition through military contractors. Meridian International had hired the mercenaries to destroy Adriano's shipping empire and claim his European trade routes. The pharmaceutical consortium led by Harrison Industries wanted his pharmaceutical distribution network eliminated before their upcoming IPO. Even the mayor's office had connections to officials seeking to force Adriano's real estate holdings into municipal seizure through orchestrated violence. They made this personal, Cassandra said, her finger tracing connection points between corporate board members and mercenary contracts. Professional elimination is one thing. Coordinated conspiracy across multiple sectors requires systematic response. Adriano nodded, his own analysis reaching identical conclusions. They wanted to use Ares Black to fragment my operations and distribute the pieces among themselves. Corporate cannibalism disguised as competitive business practices. The solution they developed combined her strategic planning expertise with his organizational resources and territorial knowledge. While law enforcement investigated the Metropolitan Museum attack, Adriano's people would systematically dismantle the conspiracy through methods that left no evidence trail and no surviving witnesses. The first target was Harrison Industries CEO Marcus Pemberton, whose pharmaceutical empire had funded 3 separate assassination attempts against Adriano over the past 18 months. Cassandra planned the operation with surgical precision, while Adriano provided the local intelligence and extraction resources. Pemberton disappeared from his Westchester estate during what appeared to be a home invasion robbery. The responding police found evidence of forced entry and missing valuables, but no body and no witnesses. What they did not find was the encrypted communication system that had connected him directly to Ares Black command structure. Within 72 hours, similar incidents occurred across the tri-state area, as every conspirator who had funded military action against Adriano's organization discovered the consequences of employing professional killers against someone with superior resources and tactical planning. The warehouse meeting was designed to eliminate the conspiracy's leadership structure in a single coordinated strike. Meridian International executives, Ares Black operational commanders, and municipal officials corrupted by pharmaceutical money gathered to divide Adriano's territories among themselves. What they found instead was a demonstration of why military special operations training remained superior to corporate security measures. Cassandra led the assault team through the warehouse complex with textbook precision, neutralizing perimeter security and communications before moving to the conference area, where 23 conspirators had gathered to celebrate Adriano's anticipated demise. The engagement lasted 8 minutes and resulted in 0 survivors and 0 evidence linking the incident to organized crime. Official investigation would conclude that a rival mercenary organization had eliminated Ares Black leadership in a territorial dispute. Corporate executives who had hired military contractors to eliminate competition had themselves become victims of the violence they had purchased. Justice, Cassandra reflected, delivered through means that legal systems could never achieve. But the real transformation occurred in the aftermath, as she integrated completely into Adriano's world while maintaining her operational independence and lethal capabilities. She redesigned his security protocols using military standards, trained his protection teams in counter-surveillance techniques, and established intelligence networks that rivaled federal agencies. Her presence changed everything. Street soldiers who had survived through violence and intimidation found themselves answering to a woman whose tactical expertise commanded instant respect. High-level associates accustomed to traditional power structures discovered that questioning Cassandra's authority meant facing Adriano's displeasure and the possibility of professional termination. Within 6 months, every rival family in New York understood that attacking Adriano's operation meant confronting the most dangerous woman in North America. Her reputation for precise violence and strategic intelligence made territorial disputes academic exercises rather than armed conflicts. The proposal came during a quiet evening in his penthouse, Manhattan's lights spreading below them like scattered diamonds against black velvet. Adriano had been planning the moment for weeks, but when he finally spoke, the words emerged with spontaneous honesty that surprised them both. "Marry me," he said simply, offering a ring that probably cost more than most people's houses. "Not because of what we have built together, though that matters. Because I cannot imagine facing any future that does not include you." Cassandra looked at the ring, then at the man who had seen through every carefully constructed identity she had worn and chosen to claim her anyway. "Yes," she replied, understanding that acceptance meant complete transformation from anonymous operator to acknowledged partner in empire building. The wedding took place 6 months later in a private ceremony that combined legitimate society attendance with representatives from every criminal organization on the East Coast. Federal agents photographed guests while Vatican officials performed sacraments, creating documentation that would puzzle law enforcement analysts for decades. But tonight, 18 months after bullets had shattered crystal chandeliers at the Metropolitan Museum, they stood together at another charity gala in the same ballroom, where their partnership had been forged through violence and mutual recognition. Cassandra moved through the crowd with easy confidence, her hand resting protectively over the slight curve of her belly that announced pregnancy to anyone observant enough to notice. The dangerous woman who had eliminated 4 professional killers in 93 seconds had become something even more powerful. A mother tobe who would teach her children that strength came from protecting what mattered most. Have you ever wondered how love stories really develop in a world where power determines survival and violence shapes every relationship? Tonight's gathering celebrated the same charitable causes while hosting guests who understood that some partnerships transcended conventional definitions of marriage and business. Adriano watched her interact with senators and socialites who treated her with the kind of careful respect reserved for women whose husbands commanded absolute loyalty from dangerous people. She had found perfect balance between the military precision that made her lethal and the social intelligence that made her invaluable. When the auction began featuring a Monet sketch similar to the one that had provided cover for the assassination attempt, Cassandra smiled and placed her hand over his where it rested on her shoulder. "Still think this is too dangerous for a pregnant woman?" she asked quietly, her eyes tracking security positions that she had personally vetted and approved. "I think," Adriano replied, pulling her closer against his chest, "that anyone stupid enough to threaten my family will discover exactly why I chose the most dangerous woman in North America to be the mother of my children." She leaned back against him, feeling their baby move as if responding to his father's voice. Around them, Manhattan's elite bid millions on artwork while understanding that the real power in the room belonged to the couple who had transformed corporate warfare into personal victory. Cassandra Thorne-Valeni had found her purpose at last, not as anonymous protection or hidden weapon, but as partner to a man powerful enough to give her world where her skills created safety rather than destruction. The auction continued around them, but she was focused entirely on the future they were building together, one where their children would inherit both empire and the knowledge that love was worth any price and any risk. That, she thought, was how legends were really made.